be a millionaire in all 6 aspects of health. So we share tips to improve your physical, mental, intellectual, social, spiritual, and financial health. Today, our topic focus is physical health and cancer. Big topic for me. How did it affect my life? And I think that's the case for a lot of people. So if you've never seen Millionaires Are Made, this is the show built on the fundamental belief that every person you meet knows something you don't, and there is something to be learned from everyone out there. So in the spirit of authenticity, though, we don't talk about tips or advice before the show starts. We just keep it real, no bias, no persuasion, just 3 awesome people sharing their life journey. I don't know who these guests are. I just met them all. So we're going to bring on our first guest, Samir.
Hey, Josh,
Good,
how you doing?
Samir. So tell us, who are you, Samir?
So the audience, I think, knows me by now. I'm on quite often. So my name's Samir. I'm a heart health coach. I focus mostly on heart health these days. But I'm also a PhD in anthropology. I have also a 20-year career working in NGOs. I play music. I write books. I do lots of things that you guys talk about on this show.
Awesome, man. Well, what's your tip for our audience today on our physical health topic of cancer?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. So I think what we'll talk about in this show is that cancer is on the rise in the U.S. and around the world. It's the number 2 killer. It might overtake heart disease as the number 1 killer sometime in the next decade. So it's very important. All of us have cancer stories. Myself, I've lost 2. I lost my best friend to cancer. I lost another good friend and work colleague to cancer a few years before that. She was very young, so that was particularly traumatizing for everyone around her. And then I've lost an uncle and an aunt to cancer. They were a bit older, so maybe less traumatic, but still pretty bad, right? And it caused me to look into some of the research around cancer. And what I found out, among other things, first of all, cancer is not just one disease. There's many, many, many different diseases. But most cancers, in fact, according to some scientists, all cancers share certain properties. And one of those properties is that they can only derive fuel from a couple of sources. Now, most of our healthy cells can derive fuel from a number of different sources, including fats and ketones and other things. But most cancer cells, for most cancers, not all, are very glucose dependent. They need sugar. And so in our diet, there's other things we can do to never get cancer. But in our diet, if we are very sugar dependent, if we're eating a lot of sugar and carbohydrates, the truth is in our bodies, cancer cells form every day. It's just a matter of, are we going to feed them or not? So if we have a very sugar-dependent diet, that we are more likely to feed those cancers and ultimately worry from those cancers. Now, that's not to put blame on anyone who may have cancer, no judgment here, but just to say that if you're interested in avoiding and preventing things, it may be worthwhile to figure out how to get the carbs out of your life, how to divorce yourself from the Twix bar or whatever it may be, and how to, go sugar-free. That may be something you want to do to avoid to minimize your risk of developing cancer.
I love the way you put it, to divorce yourself from the Twix bar. Yeah, that's a phenomenal metaphor. Our previous show was on metaphors, so you really hit it home with that one. So, I can see that it's kind of affected you personally as a lot of it, but what was the story really behind how you came across this tip, and what did that research look like?
Yes. So as much of your audience knows, I was always interested in health, but I didn't know. I thought I was an expert, but I knew literally nothing. I didn't know enough to know that I knew nothing, right? But I was getting sick. My family was getting sick. I was having weird heart palpitations. My autoimmune was out of control. My wife was also having some issues postpartum after we had our daughter. Our daughter also wasn't particularly a healthy 6 or 7-year-old. So all this was annoying me because I thought I was really, I thought I was a really cool guy. I thought I knew how to care for my family and so on. And I got the chance to enroll in a PhD program. And when I did, I didn't go to the library I was meant to go to. I went to the medical library. But my background is I have degrees in philosophy and religion and anthropology. My PhD is in anthropology. And so I didn't like download the syllabus and do whatever doctors do. I was interested in the history. Like, how do we know what we know? What's the history here? And I got so pissed off because there's evidence going back 100 years that cancer, like heart disease, like Alzheimer's, dementia, these are all metabolic diseases. And we have known how to not cure, but how to ameliorate, how to improve symptoms related to metabolic disease for 100 years or more. Yeah. So it was extremely just infuriating for me. I got so angry. You with me? So then I said, then I fixed myself. I fixed my own health problems maybe within 6 weeks. Like, it didn't take a lot of work. It's pretty easy.
Wow.
And then I got so pissed off because I was like looking around. Everyone around me everyone's overweight. There's people who have stories of cancer in their life. So, and I would give them advice. You know, when you first learn something new, you're like telling everyone, you're mouthing off. You're telling everyone what you think they should do. And people are like, "Who the fuck are you? Why should we listen to what you have to say?" And so I went and I got a certification. I got a health and nutrition certification. But of course, it's not just certification is not enough. Like, you need to actually, I guess what you learn in coaching particularly is that when I'm talking about divorcing yourself from the Twix bar or whatever it is, that's a behavior change. And behavior change is not easy. We have addictions, we have sugar addictions, we have carb addictions that serve a purpose. It's very easy for a person who's not addicted to just point fingers at the addict, right? But that's not what's going on. The addiction serves a purpose. There's some emotional trauma, there's something going on in that person's life that they need the addiction. You with me? So you can't just take it away. You gotta help them through, okay, how are you going to cope? If you go from, I don't necessarily do things suddenly, although some people like to do it suddenly, but if someone decides to go from, I don't know, 5 Coca-Colas to like 1 the next day, it's like, dude, what are you going to drink? How are you going to survive with only 1 dose of sugar and, you know, one little shot of heroin or 1 shot of Coca-Cola? How are you going to do that just with tomorrow? What's your plan? What's your survival strategy here? Talk to me about it. Because I tell you, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy, and you need to be prepared for that. What are you going to do when the kids are yelling and you're annoyed and the dog has pooped on the carpet? What are you going to do to get over that doesn't involve a Coca-Cola? Tell me now. Like, let's make a plan. I can help you come up with a plan, but the best plan is the one that you come up with yourself and you agree that you're going to adhere to yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm fascinated with that and definitely want to hear more about it. I want to, get the tips and stuff from our other guests though. So Samir, we'll bring you back on here in just a second. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Tanya.
Tanya's about to cry.
Tanya, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Josh. I love being here. This community that you and Austin are building is amazing.
Yeah, thanks. So for those of us who haven't seen, or those of our audience who haven't seen an episode with you on it, can you kind of tell us, like, who are you?
My name is Tanya Balarjan, and next month I'll be celebrating 18 years cancer-free. I was diagnosed with a marsosarcoma of the uterus and was given a 5% chance of survival. And I told my doctor, my oncologist, I said, no, thank you. Don't speak that over my life. No expiration dates. We're not doing that.
There you go. No expiration dates. So you've obviously got some firsthand experience here. What's your tip for our audience in regards to their physical health and cancer then?
Your body is always talking to you. Be smart enough to listen to it when it's telling you that something has changed. Your body does. It talks to you, and the more you listen to it, the more it will speak up. A lot of cancer symptoms are very subtle. Very subtle. For me, there were no markers in my blood. And they did a whole bunch of testing, but they were not able to find my cancer until they did a D&C. And I don't know if you all know what that is, but it's the procedure where they scrape out the uterus. And that was the only way they were able to find the cancer cells. And when I had my hysterectomy, they removed over 10 pounds of cancer. Because I was smart enough to listen to my body, the subtle changes that were going on, I pushed and continued to go and ask my gynecologist to keep going, even though there was no evidence of anything wrong with my body. So it is super important to build a relationship with your body and listen to it when it talks to you.
Well, and your story is phenomenal as far as that, and listening to your body. What have you learned about that as you've understood this tip more?
Early detection saves lives. I mean, that's scientifically proven, and a lot of people know something's wrong and just choose to ignore it because they're afraid of doctors, they're afraid of dying in a hospital, they're afraid of procedures that they don't understand, when there are simple procedures that can help diagnose, and the earlier you catch it, the better your chances are, right? Like, so it's not just about you, it's also about people that love you.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point too, is that if you're facing something like that, it's not just about you, and you're not facing it alone necessarily. It's the whole community of people that you've gathered throughout your life. So, well, thank you
Yeah,
so much for your story and your tip, and we'll bring you back on here in just a second with everybody where we can discuss more. Good to see you again.
thank you.
So I want to wrap up with our final guest. Last but not least, Mark. What's up, Mark? How are you?
I'm good,
Good,
Josh. How you
man.
doing?
Good. So for our audience, because I know you hadn't been on the show before, tell us a little bit about who is Mark.
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for the invite, and also thanks to Tonya and Samir for their, for sharing their value there. It was really interesting to listen in then. My name's Mark. I go by my personal brand, if you like, is Metabolic Mark. And a lot of what Samir was saying, I totally resonate with. And it's actually a lot of what my philosophy is, if you like, towards health and fitness. And not just health and fitness, but holistic lifestyle, actually, really, in terms of trying to get through this life, living in a way where we can be fit, happy, and well without it having to feel like a chore or restriction or sacrifice. That's really what I like to help people with.
Awesome. So in regards to our topic today here, and you've kind of heard some of the stuff from our other guests, what's your tip for our audience?
So metabolic flexibility is a word that's been used a lot more these days because of metabolic health essentially being, probably in my opinion, and certainly a lot of opinions out there these days, if you go towards metabolic health, this is the real root cause of, for example, insidious weight gain, lots of metabolic disease, basically, right? So a lot of that comes down to carb dependency. Without people realizing it. I used to be exactly the same, right? So my sort of personal transformation, if you like, not so much from a physical aesthetic standpoint, but from certainly what was going on inside. I'm 41 years old now, but up until I was about 35, I was a chronic over-exerciser. And I was, guesswork around eating, trying to, what I thought was eating well, but in theory, I was eating a lot of processed food still. For example, I don't know if you guys over in the States have imitation crab sticks, but that would be like a typical go-to of mine to try and eat a non-fattening food, right? But obviously you couldn't get more Frankenstein as a type of food group. So it's just a little example of what I mean. And the transformation I've had is basically I became fascinated with nutritional anthropology and evolutionary biology. And that all started by reading just one book, which is very famous, called Sapiens. And that started that thought process. Hang on a sec. There's probably a little bit more to our story as a species than what we might think, given that we've been around for, let's say, 2 million years or so. And that sort of snowballed into me reading a lot more, discovering more about the agricultural revolution that happened 10,000 years ago. And from a genetic point of view, we just haven't caught up, in the speed of how quickly we've moved in terms of the way our diets have adapted. And now with the digital age and the hyperconnectivity that we live in today, there's a big mismatch going on, right, in terms of what what basically our genetic expectations are and what we're actually doing. So obviously with the subject of today, it goes without saying that if we can sort of take the clues from our most optimal past, doesn't mean that we have to run around in animal skins, of course, but just sort of look at the way we used to eat, look at not just the foods that we would have eaten, but also food patterns, how our body is supposed to really deal with food scarcity, as an example, right? Rather than the sort of traditional wake up and have breakfast, lunch and dinner and snacks in between. Once we can start to sort of like just nitpick and get a little bit more granular with that and then apply it into our kind of like modern world, then health will just sort of almost instantly get better. And I went through that myself, right? So I had pneumonia once in my early 30s, purely based on how much I was training. So I got, a very common cold or chest infection, which developed into bronchitis, which then developed into pneumonia, purely because I was, overtraining really. And my immune system was just so suppressed, I guess, to be able to battle back. And there's so many people that will be in a similar situation. So people that are well-intentioned, trying to do the right thing through exercise and eating well, but actually getting the wrong advice and applying themselves almost too much to actually get what they're seeking.
Yeah, well, that's a wealth of information there. It seems like you kind of came across that from personal experience, but how else did that kind of story and opinion and tip form?
Well, as I said, I went into deep study, right? So first of all, I kind of reinvented myself as I went through this personal transformation anyway. My first steps were self-experimentation. I can remember the very first one being doing a 5-day gluten-free experiment as an example, right? Just one example. And then I was so sort of amazed at the instant results, if you like, sort of digestive system feeling a lot better, even, minor skin annoyances improving, things like that. I was like, okay, wow, this is worth sort of like exploring even more. And I started going into more experiments. But I also went back to school and I became a certified master primal health coach and nutritionist. So that study of nutritional anthropology, like I said, and also not just from a nutritional point of view and lifestyle point of view, but also from an exercise point of view. So really sort of shining light onto what I call black hole cardio training, which is this kind of it's very conventional, let's say a typical spin class or going onto an elliptical cardio machine and doing this kind of like steady state huff and puff cardio. Which again is actually depleting and putting the body in a state where it's not actually burning fat, if you like, and it only promotes a bigger appetite. And our body is probably more designed to do short explosive bursts from time to time, maybe like a sprint, and then lots of low intensity but frequent movement, right? So again, it's just sort of I got fascinated by that. I went and to myself. I became for an elite organization which charge high ticket prices. They're called Ultimate Performance. So I earned my stripes as a coach. However, the philosophy of the personal training was putting people in, a calorie deficit, quite an aggressive calorie deficit, which sort of countered my whole philosophy. So I kind of earned my coaching experience, if you like, but then went by myself. And now I help people, as I said, sort of blending everything together to streamline everything. And actually it promotes enjoyment and pleasure. We should celebrate one of the great pleasures of life, which is eating, not make it a restrictive process. And there's so many nuances to it to make it holistic in terms of well-being. And I think that we've as from a conventional standpoint, we've got it a little bit wrong. We've almost like kind of demonized certain ways of eating. We've made even exercise seem like a no pain, no gain type struggle, which it doesn't need to be at all.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your insights here. I want to kind of bring everybody back on so we can discuss our tips, because I find a lot of value in this episode, having, as many people have, been personally affected in my family by a lot of cancer here. So welcome back on, guys, here. So, there's a lot of misinformation, I feel like, that's out there about cancer and even preventative or especially like treatments for cancer. What do you guys feel about all that?
I can go. I feel that mind, body, spirit all needs to be in harmony. the one thing that I did every day was to actively decide to live every day. And I did that by visualizing putting on Wonder Woman's underwear, because for me, Wonder Woman doesn't die. I really think you need to start with mind, and then you have to have your nutrition right up here. Like you have to, it's not, dis-ease is not just a physical thing. It really, you have to go through a whole process. You have to acknowledge the things that you did or didn't do that helped you get to where you are, and work through all of that while you're going through your chemotherapy, your radiation, your surgery, or whatever else your treatment plan is. But I feel that you also should bring in things that are like aromatherapy or Reiki. I believe in the whole East meets West philosophy when it comes to medicine. And I think that that's what the problem here in America is we have tried to separate it out and make it just this one thing, and it's not.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, Tanya. And I think there's, for all of our disease, I think there are emotional roots, trauma roots, and so on. But we also see things like, I don't think that trauma is necessarily unique to our society, but we do see that like cancer rates are skyrocketing, right? So I think in addition to the trauma is always there, no question about it. And the mental and the spiritual is always there. But in addition to that, I think things are changing in our environment that, so that just make the problem much worse. And I think we need to identify those things and take them out. What Mark said really resonated with me. I mean, it would, because I'm an anthropologist. But it's like we got to really take a hard look at what we're doing at a societal level and try and figure it out. And just to get back to what Josh said, I mean, when people are sick, unfortunately, two things are happening. One is the people are sick. The second is the mainstream just doesn't have the answers. Like cancer treatment mainstream cancer treatment is basically three things. It's chemo, it's radiation, and it's cut the damn thing out, right? There's a few other things that we can talk about if you want, but those are still the main thing, right? When was the first time a cancer was cut out of a patient? Darius the Great, who was the emperor of Persia in the 6th century BC, his wife had a breast cancer and ordered her guard to cut out the cancer. That's the first time it was done, right? And chemo and radiation are, World War II technologies, essentially, were still being used. So unfortunately, we don't see the kind of progress in mainstream medicine that we would like to see. And as a result, some things that sound hokey can work for people, so there's no judgment here. And things like Reiki, I think, have quite a lot of science behind them, as do many other things. But unfortunately, there's a lot of frauds and charlatans out there selling snake oil, so people got to be careful.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Mark.
No, fascinating stuff. I wholeheartedly agree. And I also think I'm a huge believer, again, through personal experience, but also with working with many people, in terms of that power of visualization, that power of belief, that we tell ourselves, that internal dialogue, that you're telling us. I mean, it's relatively proven from placebo, right? That the power of what we're actually thinking about ourselves, even if we're not actually voicing it out loud, whatever is going on inside and whatever we're thinking about our health can kind of play out. So, I mean, one thing that I would almost advise would be to if you haven't done it before, to learn some kind of like centering exercise. It doesn't necessarily have to be called the M word meditation, but not that there's anything wrong with that, but just some kind of exercise that you can do where you're sort of telling yourself, whether it's through affirmations or just visualization alone, that your body is healthy, or if it is particular area that you're unwell or you're carrying disease, you can always put some light around there. I think there's a lot to be said in that field as well, definitely.
Yeah, I think we need to be empowered as patients and people to be active in our healing, and a lot of people just give that power over to the doctor, and then when the doctor's like, you have 6 months to live, they choose to believe that, and then they lay down and don't get back up. And I've seen that personally. I had a best friend from high school who watched me go through my entire cancer journey and then get diagnosed with her own cancer, and okay, fine. And then and that's devastating, right? When you watch other people choose to accept that kind of diagnosis and just not fight it. You have to be an active participant in your health.
Well said.
Yeah, and kind of to back to Samir's point of like, you know, Darius being the first one to have cancer cut out, right? It's like hundreds of billions of dollars have been implemented on cancer research, and we're still using, you know, the three same techniques of getting it done. When, you know, Western medicine in particular is a lot more cut it out and deal with the problem after the problem happened than it is let's find a way to not make the problem happen in the first place. And you know, even some of the stuff you guys are talking about with like positive affirmation and meditation and you know, visualization and all these things, I feel like are a part of that concoction that is that preventative medicine that is more Eastern than Western as we talk about it, right?
Holistic wellness blueprint. And
For sure.
each of us has to create our own. We have to decide what we want to add to that and what we don't want to add to that. Allopathic medicine absolutely has its place. It's required, but there should be a little bit more woo in everybody's life, to where they accept the woo, right? Like, because if you don't buy into the treatment plan, it's not going to work for you. You have to be fully invested in your treatment plan. When I told my oncologist that we were also going to do Reiki and grounding and meditation and aromatherapy, he kind of rolled his eyes at me. He's like, as long as you don't put it in your mouth, I don't care. You know, but for me, it was important that my oncologist knew what else I was doing to support myself. And then I went and did all of those things in addition to the beautiful treatment plan, which was the trio. I got all three of them.
Yeah, fantastic stuff, Tanya. So I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to refer folks to an interview that I did, a podcast that I did on my channel with a guy called Andrew Scarborough, who got diagnosed with a very rare form of brain cancer in his 20s. I won't remember his exact age, but he was in his 20s. And again, he was one of those things where he was given a very short amount of time to live, and he just didn't buy it. Number one. Number two, he was given option. I think chemo wasn't, or radiation wasn't really an option for him because it was such a rare cancer. They didn't know how to treat it, and the placement was such that neither chemo nor radiation was a very good option. So he felt like, and he's also a PhD student like me, and he felt like he had to do his own research and he had to become his own expert. And he ended up doing things like growing his own meal grubs. This sounds a bit weird, but he researched that there was an Australian species of bug that was used by Australian Aboriginal people that was very healthy and contained the right amount of fat. He was interested in being on a very high fat ketogenic diet for his treatment protocol. I'm an expert in these things. I never heard of it till I talked with that guy. So he became such an expert that he had to, and took his own course of treatment so seriously. And here he is, after being given 6 months to live or whatever, here he is 10 or 12 years later, inspiring other people to do the same. So I think these stories, you know, if I were to get cancer tomorrow, God forbid, the first thing I would do is I'd go and listen to 100 of these stories of people who've been able to do it. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. It made me think of another example. It's not cancer related, but it's one of the most well-known neuroscientists these days, Dr. Joe Dispenza, had an accident, I believe, when he was in his mid-20s. From memory, it's a motorcycle accident, and he broke his back, essentially, broke some vertebrae in his spine. And during when he was in hospital, after having operations, he was basically told he was never going to walk again, essentially. And over a period of a few weeks, he, again, through visualization and meditation, deep centering, he operated on himself, literally, going in, visualizing each vertebrae one by one, fixing it, putting it together. Again, from memory, I think he was talking about really profound meditations, 2-3 hours at a time. But at the end of it, he walks out of that hospital bed, and this is one of the most well-known neuroscientists in the world, that's deeply involved with sort of the quantum physics and epigenetics and things like that. Very interesting. Yeah.
No, I've heard that story as well and followed Joe Dispenza pretty religiously. Well, this is kind of like wraps our show. But one thing we try to do at the end of the show every time is create a daily challenge of something simple and quick that we can do every day to elevate our health in regards to our topic. So what's something you guys think that us and our audience can do as a challenge daily to elevate our physical health in regards to our topic today?
How about 30 seconds or 2 minutes of mindfulness? Envision your best, and the prompt can be, close your eyes and envision your healthiest, your best self in the morning, and then try and live up to that person for the rest of the day.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. Appreciate that, Samir. That's a really great challenge. I also want to thank some of the people who aren't here today with us, our sponsors for helping our show happen: Jesse Lewis, Sarah Mag Jones, Craig Siskowski, and you, Samir, who are with us here making our show possible. So thank you guys so much, and have an amazing rest of your day.
Thanks,
I have
Josh.
like one
Thank you.
thing to say.
Thanks, Josh.
Sure.
Schedule your routine exams. Just schedule them, whether you want them or not. Schedule them and go to them. Whether it's your mammo, your colonoscopy, whatever, just schedule it and go to it. It could save your life.
Thanks, Tanya. I appreciate that, and that's a great advice. So, from all of us here at Millionaires Are Made, take care.